We continue today with our narration of what is libertarianism, an introduction to the philosophy of liberty, as written by Pietro Angeli, Victorian Policy Director of the Libertarian Party, Victoria of Australia. I'm Carri C. of Bitcoin People. Today we are up to Chapter 7. If you would like to go back to the previous chapters, please click on the links below. Chapter 1 was, what is libertarianism? 2, what is the state? 3, what is the free market? 4, what are rights? 5, what is money? Chapter 6 was, what is taxation? And today we are talking about what are central banks. Chapter 7, what are central banks? Most people nowadays are aware of the fact that Australia and the world is suffering from an ever-increasing amount of inflation, which is making life for the average person increasingly difficult. The central bank of a country concerns itself with overseeing monetary policy. One of the supposed tasks of the central bank is to set interest rates and ensure that inflation doesn't run rampant. Both of these functions would be serviced by the free market if it were allowed to, and if currency were backed by something solid like gold. The state, however, will never allow this, as it would involve relinquishing its dominion over the money supply as outlined in the earlier section on money. Quote by Friedrich Hayek, "I do not think it is an exaggeration to say history is largely a history of inflation, usually inflations engineered by governments for the gain of governments." Contrary to oft-repeated misconceptions, inflation is not caused by a general increase in prices, or even more broadly by foreign wars, pandemics, protectionism, or a sudden but never explained increase in the level of greed. Inflation, as the name suggests, is caused by an increase or inflation of the money supply of a country. Every time an extra dollar is created and enters circulation, the value of every other dollar in circulation decreases. This is what drives up the price of everyday objects. It's not the loaf of bread getting more expensive, it's the money you use to buy it becoming less valuable. So who creates the extra money and why are they allowed to do this? This is the role of central banks. In Australia, the Reserve Bank of Australia, RBA, creates the money. A myth often perpetuated is that governments don't print their own money, they are beholden to the Reserve Bank. In reality, the government and the Reserve Bank have a symbiotic relationship. The Reserve Bank buys government bonds, follows government policy, and allows the government to spend however much it needs to fund whatever service the current-day politicians deem necessary to keep their interest groups happy. The practice of central banks buying government bonds is called quantitative easing, QE. This begs the question, where does the value of the newly created money come from? This is the first problem with quantitative easing. The value of every dollar created, as mentioned earlier, derives its value from all the dollars held by the general public. Every dollar tucked away in a savings account by a responsible individual loses value over time as the government and the Reserve Bank print new money and enrich themselves and their friends. This is why inflation is referred to by former US Libertarian Senator Ron Paul as the most evil of taxes, because it is hidden, disproportionately affects the poor and middle class, and is completely beholden to the whims of an ever-growing state that has no interest in long-term stability of currency or of protecting the savings of its citizens. Quote by Ron Paul, "The most sinister of all taxes is the inflation tax, and it is the most regressive. It hits the poor and the middle class. When you destroy a currency by creating money out of thin air to pay the bills, the value of the dollar goes down, and people get hit with a higher cost of living. It's the middle class that's being wiped out. It is the most evil of all taxes." Additionally, quantitative easing allows the Reserve Bank to artificially manipulate interest rates. Interest rates are supposed to be an important signal to the free market, which informs investors whether it is more essential to expand their operations or to restrict them, depending on the actual state of the market. The interest rates being kept artificially low after 2008 has meant that on top of inflation, the market has had a distorted signal telling people to expand, creating malinvestment, rather than save, even though the actual market didn't reflect this. By falsifying the most important price in the economy, the price of money itself, it becomes impossible to distinguish between profitable and unprofitable projects, leading to misallocation of resources and destruction of wealth in general. A large part of why there is an imminent recession looming is because for over a decade the market hasn't had the necessary information to adapt and adjust itself. This is referred to as the Austrian business cycle theory and is a central tenet of libertarian economic theory. The third and most pervasive effect of quantitative easing is that this mechanism has removed any political cost to the state promising money to the public sector. Since the government of the day need face no immediate backlash from the public for raising taxes, as the value of the new money comes through inflation and is either obscured or not felt by people until years later, governments only ever increase their spending, as to reduce it would incur political cost without immediate benefits. In Australia, both left and right wings of government have drastically increased the national debt since 2008, and talk of a balanced budget has become purely tokenistic. In essence, why would any major party do anything other than promise money to various demographics of people in order to win elections? Libertarians seeking a free market as well as free people are opposed to quantitative easing, and indeed any manipulation of currency by a central bank, and instead propose a drastic reduction in the size and scope of government operations. Libertarians generally seek to end reliance on fiat currency whose value is entirely beholden to government policy, and return to an honest form of money, such as the gold standard or some similar backed system of currency, where money is at any time exchangeable for gold. This would bring a halt to the state's ability to print money and derive the value of the new money without consent or knowledge from the savings of their citizens.